accidents do happen, we'll make it right, and we expect not for this not to happen again. So it prompts introspection, it prompts reflection, and it often prompts changes. We all have our personal experiences with this, but the roads can be unpredictable and dangerous. And anytime you're doing something systematically, so in this case, moving waste from one location to another, all of those kind of day-to-day incremental risks and hazards start becoming real factors that you need to take into consideration. So, while the daily risk to you getting into a car accident on your commute might be pretty trivial and small, if you're running several trucks a day, every day, indefinitely, there's a real risk and in fact, a likelihood that at some point there will be some sort of accident or incident that creates a problem for you. And you need to have a policy in place, procedures, and an understanding of what your responsibilities are if something like that does happen. There's kind of two reasons why something like that happens. The first is accidental. There's a car accident on the road, a truck overturns, there's an obstacle, a deer runs across the road, and the next thing you know, your truck has spilled material across the roadway, and you're now dealing with that liability and responsibility. And there are kind of two main issues that arise from that. The first is a public health risk. Obviously anything that's classed as a hazardous waste or a medical waste, even if it's relatively small risk, does present a risk to the public, and that needs to be contained and removed so it can be safely decontaminated. And in any exposed area, washed down, bleached down. If it's outside, probably not the biggest risk in the world. The second big risk is private patient information, HIPAA protected information. As you can imagine, if it's red bag waste coming out of a hospital, it may have patient identifying information on it. That means it's required to be kept confidential under HIPAA. And if you do have an uncontrolled release before that material is decontaminated and destroyed, not only are you looking at potential state level violations with medical waste regulations, you're also looking at federal HIPAA violations. And so it's very important that you establish what your protocol is, what your procedure is, and try to keep the risks of those sorts of incidents to an absolute minimum. I think the first question to look at is feasibility. If you're a, say, urban hospital in a East Coast kind of well-developed city, you just may have no more footprint to put waste treatment on site, to convert space to waste treatment. You may be capped at utilities. There may be kind of just physical constraints that you can't work against. So in that case, moving the waste offsite to be handled and treated is certainly going to be your best option. Kind of the other end of the spectrum, maybe you're in a kind of remote, less well-developed location out west. You have plenty of space around you, but trucking it would require taking it tens or even 100 miles kind of on the roads to a faraway treatment location. That might be an instance where, as you look at it, your internal risk analysis says, hey, this is something we can move on site, we can do it efficiently, effectively, and kind of manage our own risk internally in that way. And it's actually topical to a number of conversations I'm having now as kind of relate to kind of wider oil impacts kind of on the market and on business operations. But medical waste transportation is really much more of a logistics challenge and a logistics price service than it is kind of just the form of treatment or cost of treatment. Because kind of the hidden lever underneath all that pricing is the price of diesel for powering the trucks that pick up the waste, that transport the waste, that move the waste. And so you're seeing kind of situations where everything should have been stable, but now you have oil prices going up. A lot of contracts will have features in them where pricing is adjusted if the price of fuel goes up, because suddenly those trucks cost a lot more to run. So I'd expect if we see kind of a sustained increase in the price of diesel, push for just greater efficiency across the system, reducing the number of miles driven, reducing the distance waste is moved, increasing waste density so that trucks are running more efficiently. As I generally think about it, if you're a tattoo shop or you're a dentist's office, the amount of waste you're probably generating in a week really doesn't merit going out and bringing in kind of a new piece of equipment, kind of doing training yourself or bringing on a new member of staff to kind of manage that piece of equipment and trying to move that on site. If you're, moving a box of sharps a week, maybe a bag of bag waste a week, you really, third party is going to be your economically and logistically just by far your best option. As you start getting into kind of larger scales, that's where it's, now you're talking, regularly filling 96-gallon bins multiple times per week. That's kind of where you start seeing the crossover. And at that point, the logistical challenge of managing your waste, bagging, boxing, or sealing your waste, documenting, manifesting, and signing off on the transfer of your waste and confirming that's been treated may start becoming enough of a logistical headache to kind of merit some of those other considerations. We're kind of looking at what the options are for doing your own treatment. I think the devil's always in the details. It kind of makes a great deal of difference, kind of what the specific sustainability goals are, and whether it's looking kind of at the full value chain or whether it's just looking at kind of the parts they're directly participating in. So, groups looking at it and says, hey, right now, these are our sustainability metrics. If we take over managing this waste, all of a sudden we're going to have to spend more energy, more time, more labor to kind of do that. That's going to push our numbers up. That it doesn't align with our sustainability goals. On the other hand, if you're looking at it from a full cycle perspective, maybe you say, hey, by moving this in-house, I have this value assigned to what the transporter is doing right now. I'm cutting the number of miles driven by 70%. That's going to have this impact on kind of my overall sustainability metrics. That's something that's worthwhile for us to pursue. And again, it kind of comes down to, what's the volume of waste being moved here? Because that 70% reduction in miles driven on kind of a low volume of waste matters a lot less than a large volume of waste. And so each group or each board will have to sit down and kind of decide what are the metrics that are kind of highest return for us, and what are metrics that if we chase them, we're going to put a lot of time, effort, and resources into doing this for kind of a questionable return. It's tough because, while the first group kind of that has to take responsibility for a spill will be the group kind of moving the material, ultimate liability rests with whoever created it. So if you picture the case of a hospital that's generating waste and a trucking company that's moving it off site, while the trucking company is going to be kind of immediately dealing with any incident, it's still ultimately the hospital's responsibility. And so they're going to get pulled into any investigation or any regulatory action kind of around that incident. So we often see kind of a tightening of SOPs, a change of procedures kind of following that. There's retroactive look back. Hey, what happened? What failed? What can be put into place to kind of prevent similar failures in the future? And kind of out of that analysis may come action items. It may come, this was a freak accident where, this is the safest thing we can be doing. Accidents do happen. We'll make it right, and we expect not for this not to happen again. So it prompts introspection, it prompts reflection, and it often prompts changes. So I think though the kind of points you mentioned are kind of the classic inflection points for when a group kind of looks at making a decision or doing something different. So it will be when a contract renewal is coming up and they're going back through the budget for the previous year. It may be, if they're growing, if they're adding new buildings, if they're adding new sites, and they're looking at kind of how they're moving logistics kind of across those sites, whether that's something they want to kind of manage themselves or kind of third party out.